Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you from the WELT studios at the Allen County Public Library here in Fort Wayne. It is Thursday, August 8th, as we record here in the morning in the U.S., and what was a slow week in terms of driver news has turned into a busy week just in the last 24 hours of driver news. We have Canapino out at Juncos Hollinger. We have Alexander Rossi set to return. We have Juri Vips going to be in a fourth entry at Rahal at Portland. All those stories we'll get to this week here on the pod. But first, hi, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. It was nice that we had some news come out before recording the podcast, unlike last week when we recorded our predictions for next year, and then literally the same day,
hours later,
Marshall Pruitt drops his silly season update, 4 pages of goodness. So maybe we'll touch on that and where we were in the right area and where we were completely wrong. But nice to have some news this week to talk about.
Yes, for sure. And we'll start with the Juncos news because that is by far the biggest bit of information in the last week in IndyCar world. Agustin Canapino out after about, a season and a half in IndyCar. It was a good run by him, but there were several things holding him back when you look at his short-lived career in IndyCar and the impacts that we've had. So I think we just start with the timeline of notable events in his IndyCar career. Obviously, before he came to IndyCar, he did those exhibition tests in Argentina. Ricardo Juncos, IndyCar officials trying to bring a race to Argentina, and it seemed like they were close. And then when it wasn't on last year's schedule, they're like, well, it could be an exhibition race later in the year. He kind of felt like that was done. And then when they had an election and there were a lot of cutbacks and stuff, you knew that wasn't happening. So that was something that hurt him going into this season in terms of sponsorship. But last year, that really wasn't an issue. And you start at race 1. I mean, yes, there was a red flag late in his session, but he advanced out of Q1 in his group.
He did. Looking at his season and a half in IndyCar, I can't remember a driver in the recent past that I've had such low expectations for starting off, then exceeding those expectations, and then falling back down so quickly, both on and off the track. Kind of what comes to mind when I think of Canapino is I had low expectations. All of a sudden, he looks like a more than competent driver. We praised him on the podcast last year especially. And then between reactions off the track, on social media, and then the fact that he has never had a top 10 finish in a points race, finished 10th at Thermal this year, all those things kind of factor in to the fact that with 5 races left, he's out of right. And the fact that he doesn't bring much, if any, money, which we know Juncos is in desperate need of.
Well, and that's the biggest issue. Okay, so I'm incorrect. He didn't advance out of his group, but he did finish 12th in his debut. So an outstanding debut in IndyCar.
Back-to-back 12th place finishes to start.
You go to Texas, first oval, he has 1 test there. He finishes 12th. I mean, Juncos as a team gets off to a flying start with Callum Ilott as well, because didn't he have a top 5? Was it a top 5 at Texas?
I think so.
I mean, they were outstanding early on. And you thought, wow, there's a lot of momentum going into the Indy 500. He had that cool livery that replicated an Argentine soccer jersey after they won the World Cup. Really cool car. He was running well in the race, got taken out late in an incident, no fault of his own. But you look at what they did through the first half, things were positive. Yes, you did have the Long Beach incident where the team screwed up and they had Canapino in the lead and Ilott coming out of the pits on a restart, and Elio was trying to get a lap back. It was a lap down behind them, and there was contact, and then fans went crazy. You thought, okay, this is a blip. This isn't going to define his career, but unfortunately, that was a sign of things to come.
It was, and it just he exceeded expectations right off the bat, and then he had those back-to-back 12s. And the rest of the season last year, he had 1/12 at Toronto and nothing better than that. So Then you thought year 2, you come in and, he finishes his first 3 races. I mean, you count the top 10 at Thermal, and then he had a 16th at St. Pete, 15th at Long Beach. You think, okay, he's making strides. And then it just fell off again. Since then, only a 12th at Detroit. Of course, missed the Road America race and 22nd in points. And I think the dismissal of Canapino has as much to do with off the track, both financially and the issues within this team, as much as it does on track. It's not like they're putting a rookie or somebody they're looking to put into this car full time to replace him, as far as we know. I mean, it's going to be Connor Daly, right?
Yeah, for Gateway, we fully expect to be Connor Daly. And I got it mixed up. Ilott was 5th at St. Pete, 9th at Texas. But either way, they had a really good runs to start the season. I mean, for a Canapino to be 12th in his debut oval race is incredible. At a place like Texas, where high speeds, high banks, you're going to have crashes. Very impressive. And something that I think we underestimated with his career is he has a lot of racing experience. Yes, he didn't have IndyCar experience, and he didn't have a lot of formula-type car racing experience, but he is very experienced as a driver, and that showed in his ability early on to adapt and get better through each session, to not make critical mistakes for the most part in his rookie year. I mean, he just wasn't making rookie mistakes. Now, there was a team mistake at Long Beach, and then there was the contact at Laguna Seca between the two teammates. And that really should have been a warning sign that the team didn't really take that seriously. IndyCar, it seemed, kind of had to step in. It just feels like that was really the turning point, let alone the fact that clearly less sponsorship this year with him. And it's a team that you got to get results. I mean, year 1, we were kind of thinking, I remember talking, and we're looking at him like, okay, kind of Jimmy Johnson level expectations, where you could be a second and a half off to start a weekend and just continue closing that gap. If you get within a half second, that's impressive. But that was never the issue with Canapino. He was very much there on the timing charts in terms of being competitive. Yeah, he may have been toward the back end, but he was never so uncompetitive. It was just unfortunately, the issues with his fans that ultimately I feel like really doomed him in. And there are rumors, and again, I want to say the word rumors, that after he crashed at either Iowa in race 1, after he qualified this year, top 10, and then crashed out, and then he had the crash at Toronto. I mean, he's had a bad string of races. There are rumors at one of those events, he didn't really, I think it was Iowa, he didn't really help out with the team or whatever, kind of went off on his own. Then you obviously have what happened Road America weekend, where he wasn't in the right place to race, and
which is still
the whole thing was really bizarre.
Yeah, well, this is, I think, the biggest thing for me is, and we talked about Agustin Canapino last year as this guy. He's a veteran driver. He's in his 30s. You felt like, okay, he could be the leader of this team on track, and he never really was that guy. He never really was the dude that says, I'm going to be the professional that's going to be the veteran to, if we hire a young driver, a Callum Ilott, right, last year, and you felt like he could be a good mentor. He never delivered on that. And the longer it went, the more problems he caused or was a part of. And that's not what you want from a veteran driver. I think if he would have come in and been the guy that everybody could lean on, the team, his teammate, all that stuff, and delivered in that way, I think he would have a future, a longer future at least with Juncos. But he just wasn't that dude. He never materialized into a veteran father-like figure leader for this team on track. And I think that maybe is the most damning indictment of his career with Juncos is he was brought in to be that guy, and he wasn't. He was more a problem than anything else.
For all the goodwill early on and starting as a rookie in IndyCar, I mean, learning English in like a few weeks, basically. I mean, it was very impressive.
It's not easy.
And, he did all the right things early. Yes, you had Long Beach, and that seemed like a blip, but then by Laguna Seca last year, I mean, it felt like, is he going to come back? And he did, but the sponsorship wasn't there. Last year, he was able to sneak into the leader circle at Laguna Seca. This year, they're on a string of bad races. The results speak for themselves. Mid-Ohio, 22nd. Iowa, 26th. Iowa, 25th. Toronto, 26th. He's fallen behind in the leader circle. He's out of it at the moment as far as the entrance goes, and that team desperately needs the funding. So that's really what it comes down to. And Tony DeZeno had some good stats. The 78 car finished 20th or worse in 7 of 11 of Agustin Canapino starts in 2024, 20th or worse in 10 of 17 starts in 2023. It's a numbers game, right? And just quite simply, they mutually and amicably decided to part ways.
Amicably.
Whatever.
Whatever.
I always love those announcements.
Right. This is the thing. If he was more of a leader and if he brought more money, he'd still be with a seat, have a seat. But he's neither, and that's why he doesn't. And
it's year 2. Year 1, you learned the tracks, and Thermal wasn't a points-paying race. He's not going to race at Milwaukee now, so that's irrelevant. He's learned the schedule, and we just didn't see improvement. We saw him go backwards, and we saw a lot more crashes and mistakes and more incidents. Obviously, the incident with Pourchaire at Detroit, probably the most notable one. Indy 500, a couple spot improvement, but when you're finishing 22nd, that's nothing to write home about. And when your teammate, Callum Ilott had a good season last year, but I feel like Grosjean has been a lot more consistent, even though I think they're the same in points, because Ilott was 16th last year and Grosjean is 16th right now, but I think he's putting consistently more results together than what Ilott did last season. So you're getting beat by your teammate back-to-back years, and I get it. You were a rookie last year, but at some point you got to see results, and the results aren't there.
Pure and simple. They're just not there. Now, where does Juncos go from here heading into next year? I think that's the next question.
I think the obvious answer for now is Connor Daly. It almost feels like a lock. He's going to run Gateway. He tested with him the other week. He had good testing times. He's run well at Gateway in his career. That makes a lot of sense. He did win. I forgot about this. Christopher DeHard pointed this out. He won Star Mazda in 2010 with Juncos on the Road to Indy ladder, as it was then known. So he makes sense to just finish out the season unless they have someone else in mind they want to try out for next year. But I don't know if that's where they're going to go, because they also need consistency. Like, they need to get that car in the leader circle. And I think that's probably their best option, unless they want to have Daly run the ovals and maybe have like a Teo Pourchaire run at Portland.
I could see that, having Connor Daly in for the 4 oval races and then somebody else in for Portland for sure. So, but looking into next year, and we made our predictions last week, and we both said Canapino was going to be done. We feel like Grosjean will be back, should be back. So you needed an infusion of money and youth into that team. And so do we look at a Devlin DeFrancesco as still that dude to replace Canapino?
That's still been the hot rumor. There's been shifting around as we kind of transition, I guess, to more silly season stuff. But that's been the rumor. Part of it is Andy DeFrancesco's Devlin's father, I think, wants like an ownership stake in the team, if I'm not mistaken, on how that would work. So that could be a holdup in terms of how this works with the team. Do we see Juncos and Hollinger split up? Who knows? Anything is possible. Now, that's not been rumored, but at some point, Brad Hollinger wants to see his investment come with sponsors coming in and results, right? You're in racing, you want to see results, and Juncos has not really been getting the results I think that they expected going full-time with a 2-car operation.
Yeah, I feel like we know that Brad Hollinger isn't happy having to front a lot of money for this team to compete with 2 cars. So they need an infusion somehow with cash. And there's also in Marshall Pruitt's article talking about a team trying to buy Juncos, which we know that to be Prima, and buy their two potential charters, which we expect that to happen. So, there's always smoke, there's fire. Like, it was denied, but people aren't just talking about that if there's absolutely nothing there. I could see Brad Hollinger saying, and to your point, breaking off and saying, I'm going to do my own thing and find my own sponsorship. I'm done spending my own money on your team. I could see that. But I could see that maybe after next year, if he's still funding a fair amount of this team, I still give it one more year before we reach that point. But I think the important thing is to get a cash infusion, significant amount of money, whether it's driver, whether it's sponsorship, or it's a combination. They need to figure that out.
Now, they have an option, Juncos does, on Grosjean to return. I mean, if he can finish the season strong, he's been a lot more consistent this year. I would expect him to return, assuming he wants to keep racing in IndyCar. And then, as Pruitt points out on his silly season article on Racer.com, there's talk between DeFrancesco and Juncos, and you know, could this be like a Rick Ware Racing, Dale Coyne Racing kind of co-entrant thing? There's discussion there, and Juncos Hollinger needs the money in terms of to move forward and move up in terms of the pecking order of teams. And also, as Pruitt points out, you don't really think about this, but DeFrancesco and Grosjean were teammates. Now, were they on good terms, bad terms, kind of indifferent? Who knows? But that is another factor to take into mind if this does go through that way.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that is your predictions right now for what we think we know about Juncos, but nothing is surprising that we learned this week, especially after Road America. The writing was on the wall after the Road America issue.
Yeah, I mean, we thought he wouldn't be back in a car, period.
Correct.
And he was able to run a couple more races. So that was a surprise in and of itself, only because the team didn't get Nolan Siegel. He got poached pretty quickly right after. I think that's what we thought would happen, and that is simply not the case. Looking at the silly season article, I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot that caught us off guard. I guess the one thing that we discussed, and we didn't talk about contraction really that much in terms of teams, and it's that Chip Ganassi Racing could just go down to 3 and possibly not even farm an entry off to Meyer Shank, and it would just be Dixon, Palou, and then whoever is in the 8 car, because that's the leader circle entry, and that would likely be Kiffin Simpson.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of a guy that that has a lot of money, or at least a family that has a lot of money, it makes too much sense financially. He may not be the most deserving driver to keep one of those seats, but he's got the most money, and money talks.
Money always talks, and
especially in racing, right?
That's the biggest thing. I mean, there's really, outside of that, was there anything that kind of took you completely off guard in the update? There really wasn't a whole lot I remember seeing. And didn't you say that Ganassi was exploring potentially Indy Lights?
Was
that in there, or is that
it was Ganassi else that was thrown around? If they, the thing with Ganassi is with their they have five cars obviously and staff. If they drop to 3 full-time cars, where would they put that staff to hold on to them and retain them?
Especially because their IMSA program they're losing the factory Cadillac effort, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Correct. So it was, I think we look at it and say it's either Lights or bringing in Meyer Shank and using your extra folks in the team to really be a bridge with MSR and work with them. So it sounds like that's the more likely path as opposed to Lights. But we knew that Ganassi wasn't going to run 5 next year. Did we think they'd go down to 3? Maybe not, but sounds like that's the most likely thing, and it benefits Prima with those 2 charters, right?
Yes. Yeah, because, I mean, the cap of 27. So if there are 25 charters and Primas on the outside looking in, I mean, they're just going to have to qualify their way in. Well, there wouldn't be too many cars to qualify, you know, obviously outside the Indy, that cap doesn't apply, but they would have to either buy charters from a team or essentially get leader circle for 2026 with what they do with those entries. It's all very confusing, and we still don't have the charter info really all figured out. So that's the confusing part, I guess, in all of this, is we don't really have the clear details. And Ganassi's still looking for new opportunities in IMSA. Pruitt reports they want to keep their sports car team together. And I don't follow IMSA really that much, so I don't know if they're going to get an Acura.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I usually skip the IMSA sections in the mailbag, so I really don't know much about IMSA.
Yeah.
All I know is in terms of Ganassi is with that program going away, they have an influx of crew that don't have anything to do for 2025, and it's either lay them off or find something else for them to do. And could that be a lights program, or could it be helping MSR in a new partnership? Who knows?
Yeah, is there a partner team? And then they provide other crew who go over to Meyer Shank, and Shank runs 4 cars at Indy and 3 full time, and or is that where Prima's getting a lot of their talent? Because again, Cadillac's gone, so and again we don't follow IMSA. There might be rumors already out there that we're not privy to, but this is another factor to keep in mind.
Here's something too. We remember this from a couple weeks ago about the article about potentially restricting entries for each team in lights. Could that be a byproduct of teams in IndyCar, let's say Ganassi, interested in going into lights, and Ganassi saying, well, we don't want to jump in a pool that already has 20-some cars.
And 10 of them from HMD.
And 10 of them from HMD. If we're going to jump in with 2 or 3, is there a way to limit other entries? Because if, let's say you have Ganassi interested in entering, let's say 2 or 3, you have, let's say, I don't know, Rahal interested in entering 2 or 3, and you're already at 22 cars, 20, 21 cars, what's the benefit there? So could this be a roundabout way to say there are IndyCar teams interested in jumping into lights that don't like the fact that there are mega teams in lights like HMD? And quite frankly, IndyCar doesn't owe as much to HMD as it does its big IndyCar teams, right? You need to protect your IndyCar teams and look out for them. So what is HMD's negative could be a positive net in terms of Indy Lights if you have more of those IndyCar teams jumping into lights.
Other news, Ed Carpenter Racing, apparently there are rumors that ECR is for sale. Officials with ECR denying that. Also, Rinus VeeKay, a free agent. Of course, comes down to funding. And VeeKay apparently could be on the short list at Meyer Shank, also at Prima and Rahal as well. And then Christian Rasmussen, does he return with the team? Not a whole lot there, but I think, one of our listeners will get to later, VeeKay, could he be a fit, at Rahal perhaps? That's something interesting. We talked about Juncos Hollinger and everything happening with that team. Other updates, Meyer Shank Racing, they're denying, Mike Shank denying that they're running a third car. So, and that the 66 is still wide open, which makes sense. I mean, they're evaluating Malukas through the season, and then they'll kind of see what happens.
So far, so good for Malukas, right?
I would say so. I would think he's if he can get a couple more top 10s, and obviously it's very important to get the car in the leader circle. If he can accomplish both those things, I think that seat is his.
I would agree if he can continue to show what he's been able to show in that seat since.
And Pruitt saying that Malukas has received an offer from somewhere else. Could it be Prima? Could it be Rahal? I mean, Pruitt says either of those would make sense. I would agree there. And then updates on the technical partnership thing. Again, we'll see what happens with that. It's unclear what's going to happen, but all signs seem to point to Shank moving on from Andretti.
Which, is interesting in itself. I still wonder, how long is too long for Shank to still be affiliate? Like, when are you just going to break off and be your own thing? I understand it benefits you tremendously to partner with a team, first Andretti and then potentially Ganassi. I'm just kind of looking at him going, just do your own thing. But
look at the teams that don't have partnerships. I mean, even Penske has a partnership. Ganassi doesn't, McLaren doesn't, Dale Coyne doesn't, Ed Carpenter Racing doesn't, Rahal doesn't.
Yeah, and
Juncos did, and they no longer do.
Which is why McLaren is open. But I mean, MSR has a thing too, because they are going to need an influx of personnel, because the personnel they had in sports cars will now go into their 2025 program after not having a 2024 program. So that's why it makes sense to partner with Chip Ganassi Racing. Chip Ganassi Racing is going to have this surplus of employees. MSR is going to have this absence of employees, and they can meld together and help each other out.
Well, and factor in a lot of MSR employees are going back to the sports car side, who are helping out. Yeah, who are helping out on the IndyCar side.
Correct. So you're losing guys to sports cars for MSR. You're gaining guys from sports cars for Chip Ganassi. Help each other out.
Yeah, that alliance makes a lot of sense. And then really elsewhere, I mean, Teo Porcher is a candidate everywhere, it seems, and rightfully so. Prima, there's not a whole lot there yet.
I think the biggest thing for Prima is if and when Ganassi drops to 3, Prima's off the hook in terms of having to qualify for every single race, which is huge. And then you're at 27 full times for next year, barring anybody else adding. But I think, and here's the thing, I think some people are going to be like, well, it restricts one-offs. Take Juri Vips, for example. Let's say this is this time next year, and RLL says we're going to run somebody like Vips. He's going to have to qualify for a race. And how's that going to work? So the only people that can be bumped next year are the ones that aren't in the leader circle? Is that how I understand it?
The charters.
Or the charters?
Yeah.
But it'll go by leader circle this year, right? Or the top 22
top
get
25
charters?
will
Top
get
25?
charters.
So
we think.
He'll only be able to bump 2 cars next year, in theory. So what I'm saying is it's going to limit the one-offs we see, or the late season, let's give this guy a chance to see what he can do, that Rahal does quite frequently.
I mean, we wouldn't see, as you're saying, we wouldn't see a Vips running at Portland, and then we'll get to Rahal next.
Unless they were perfectly fine with him having to qualify for that race.
So that's the big change. And speaking of Rahal, so again, Vips running at Portland is not a surprise. He did this last year, also ran at Nashville. Obviously not going to run at Nashville on an oval this year. The team tested F2 driver Zane Maloney last week. Also, Pruitt says Rahal's made an offer to Malukas. Says Rossi would be a perfect fit for the team, which, yes, he would. But Rossi would have to feel confident in their Indy 500 program improving and or the amount of money he gets in the contract. So, again, it still feels like it's Rahal, it's Juri Vips, and then TBD.
Correct.
That's really where this is at. And then really that's about it. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of earth-shattering stuff beyond that. Ganassi's going to dip likely to 3 cars.
There wasn't anything from last week's episode that we were completely off base. And that makes me feel better.
For once.
Makes us think we kind of know what we're talking about.
Kind of.
Sometimes, maybe, occasionally.
Yeah. The other news of the week, and this coming down, not really a surprise, especially after he had his cast off, after he had thumb surgery from the Toronto crash, is that Alexander Rossi has been cleared by IndyCar for next weekend at Gateway.
Which I guess hadn't been officially announced, but I kind of anticipated him
as did I.
Driving anyway. I saw that this morning and I was like, oh, I just assumed. So, I mean, good to see, but not surprising.
No, not really surprising at all. To sum up, and I guess to me, going back to Canapino and Juncos, so one, Grosjean had a crash in testing at Gateway.
Which wasn't, if you saw the video,
it wasn't massive.
It was just kind of backing into the wall. I mean, it was, hopefully the gearbox was okay, but it was just basically back wing damage. I mean, you say crash, and other people said crash, and you think oval crash, okay. It really wasn't much of anything.
But it's never good when you're a team,
Correct.
Struggling budget-wise. But I guess for Canapino, to sum it up, to me, it felt like unfulfilled expectations after we saw how strong he started his rookie year. It's just it feels like a what if.
It was never built upon, and the issues off track magnified those.
If you agree or disagree with us, and I'm sure some of you disagree with our takes on all of this, let us know. We'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free. You'll get emails of new episodes, also any special announcements. Plus, you can check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers on there. On social media, follow us, IndyCar Podcast, on Twitter /X, also on Instagram, on Facebook. Just search for New Track Record. newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com is the email address. If you want to email us a question, rant, comment, whatever your heart desires, you can send it that way. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord on there. And as always, you can listen to the podcast, download it for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, CastBox, Player FM, YouTube Music, wherever you find your podcast, download and listen in for free. Okay, mailbag time, and we have some good stuff. Some good stuff on an off week, if you will. So we'd kind of gone back and forth on the oval issues in terms of the quality of the racing, and you'd gone back and forth with Hickey93, Matt Hickey, friend of the show, saying it doesn't seem like the urgency is there to fix the oval issues ASAP. Thoughts? And Hickey saying, I think there is, but they're in a box with the options at their disposal. They tried at Iowa between test and race, but it didn't work. Surface in different conditions didn't help. It's also worth mentioning that changes that compromise driver safety aren't worth it.
Which is interesting because the one thing that I did read in the mailbag this week from Marshall Pruitt insinuated that in some testing at Iowa and or Gateway, I can't really remember, there were tire failures with some compounds they were trying and crashes. And so I have no problem with not changing the formula because Firestone and the series can't come up with a good enough, at least in the short term for this year, to rectify the situation. Because as Hickey said, you don't want to compromise safety. You can't have tire failures, right? But I would love IndyCar to come out and say that. And basically say, look, we know the oval package needs work, but we have not been able to find a solution in the short term this year, and we're not going to compromise safety. Pretty much what Matt Hickey said. I would really appreciate IndyCar doing that and coming out and saying it publicly, as opposed to being silent, that then makes people think that they're not caring.
And isn't that kind of a hallmark of the Penske Entertainment administration, where it's just silence?
You never admit fault. And I think that's a Penske thing across his entire industry. And yes, he's a billionaire, but billionaires are open to criticism too. And I think that's one thing that maybe this regime with Roger at the top is you just don't admit anything wrong. You never recognize and identify a problem. You will try to fix a problem, but you never identify a problem.
Can you name me a billionaire who's open to criticism?
Very true. But I think you're looking at with 4 of the next 5 races ovals, and if they're stinkers, there's going to be, with every successive race, more and more verbal angst at the issues with the oval product in IndyCar. And the fact that they just refuse to publicly identify it makes it, at least to me, more frustrating.
And the series is in a tough spot because the drivers are doing these tests. They're saying, they're being honest when asked questions. Yeah. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid. Oh, it's going to be a great race. They're like, oh, it's going to be tough to pass, follow the leader at these tracks. And so far, Iowa, they were correct. 2 out of 2. We'll see what happens at Gateway. We'll see what happens at Nashville. But eventually you have to fix this because promoters aren't going to like that. They want to sell tickets. And unless you're going to give some amazing alternate experience at a track beyond the race, which is just simply not going to happen outside of the Hy-Vee IndyCar weekend, then you're in a tough spot. Elsewhere, M. Vaney says, I suppose you were in the rooms where they discuss this, so there's no urgency. Not all decisions will be made in a public forum. True, but at some point, though,
my point stands.
You have to speak.
Why can't you speak publicly about these issues?
Historic Hot Lap says, with tire development time, I don't expect a quick turnaround. There's talking an alternate right side tire in Iowa. We saw how that went. I'm all for more ovals, but with the terrible oval package, there should be more focus from IndyCar on perfecting the product before 2025. That's all we're asking for.
Correct. We probably won't get it in terms of real discussion on the issues and the potential solutions, because that's just not how Penske operates. But I don't like this, blind focus, have your blinders on and don't recognize issues that are clearly there. And they're going to be magnified over these final 5 races, in which 4 ovals, especially if all 4 of them are stinkers. And we've already heard from drivers, as you mentioned, about the issues at Gateway. And will they follow to Milwaukee? And will they follow to Nashville? And you can stick your head in the sand as much as you want, but if you don't publicly recognize the problem, you're going to alienate people. And this is a thing that doesn't only affect this year, but who's to say, Milwaukee, if you do a great job this year and bring in people and it's a stinker of a race and half of those people decide they're not coming back next year, it could be a banger of a race next year, but it's always a year after, right? You could have a banger next year. Okay, then 2026, you have people show up. So it's not just this year that it affects. It affects next year and beyond.
For sure. Some replies from last week's episode. This from Ed Joris. When handicapping the race for the driver's title, keep in mind that Palou and Dixon will have to take a grid drop for a 5th engine. Willpower might also. I feel like he's mentioned that before. Historic Hot Laps saying, great silly season episode. I feel like these predictions are pretty spot on. Thanks for the quality show.
Was that meant for us?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Aaron Bear 317. So I talked about VK to Rahal. He says, when you guys were going over Rahal, I was thinking VK would be a good fit there, and Marshall Pruitt obviously agrees with Aaron on that one. All right. Speaking of ovals, ticket sales doesn't look good for Gateway. Plenty of good seats still available.
A lot of dark blue in that track map.
Yes. Indy Oreo saying my social feed flooded with 2-for-1 ticket offers for Nashville. Uh-oh. Yes, they're trying a lot of different stuff.
That's my thing is people, we said that, I think, about Nashville, or Milwaukee?
Yes, I was curious. So I went and saw like a Facebook ad or whatever for Nashville, and the comments, I mean, people are livid about the race being moved away from downtown. Absolutely furious.
I get it, but also I guess I was out of... That's one where I won't lay into the promoter or even IndyCar. It's like, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah, no, but people are really upset about the move.
I don't think
IndyCar fans were praising the move to the Oval, but I think people who have attended the race...
Yeah, nobody wants to go.
They're saying, I don't want to drive that far out of the way.
Correct.
Why stay in downtown Nashville now? I understand all the questions.
And and I know people want to hate on the course and the chaos, but people like going to road courses. They like being able near their hotel and bars and restaurants and being able to walk around and do different things. And now you're just going to an oval where you're going to sit in an aluminum bleacher for a couple hours
in mid-September in the heat.
Mid-September in the upper South and watch probably what's going to be a procedural race.
This from Lynn _IndyCar. IndyCar fans yell that we want more ovals.
And then they don't go.
Support them. Exactly. DeGuerra says, and the racing will be crap too. Hunter's Way 67 just says brutal. Indy 500 Trump says the short oval product is garbage. And other than a couple exceptions, has been since 2018. Not worth a long drive for most fans. I would say it's just an unfortunate thing with the aero screen plus the hybrid. I feel like Iowa was okay in previous years. It's gotten so much worse.
But my problem is, too, with that is IndyCar knew this was coming for years. Okay? They knew the aero screen was coming, and they knew the hybrid was coming. The thing was supposed to be revealed or be on track in 2022. Okay? So these problems that IndyCar is having, and some people want to give IndyCar the benefit of the doubt, have been known for years. Again, being reactionary, right? Not proactive, but reactive.
Couple other replies on this. Nick _Booth 50 says, sheesh. Talking about the ticket sales. Yeah, it's not ideal. To be fair, wait till a week before. Wait till Monday next week. Has that improved a lot? Wait till the day before. And Daniel SCM 2004 just says, IndyCar needs more ovals, but, alternating lowercase and uppercase characters, obviously being very sarcastic on that. Elsewhere on the mailbag, you post this. I love this. If auto racing was named an Olympics event. How would that work? And people sharing their ideas. BK Hickey says, okay, so why do I just keep seeing the kids' Hot Wheels track with a large orange loop?
Yes, and which took me down memory lane. I had the old school orange Hot Wheels track. I think my dad had it when he was a kid with the big loop, like 180-degree turns, the 90-degree turns with banking, and you had the piece that would take 2 lanes into one, all that stuff. That's what came to mind.
Samulus says just make it a spec Miata Olympic event. It would be a riot. That would be cool. Ben Smith for real says, I figure it'd have to be like the old IROC series with identically prepared cars competing on both a road course and an oval. Aggregate finish determines medalists. NK Harden says, not sure you can do more than karting. Has to be low cost, minimal setup. As universal spec as can be. Almost every driver in the world did some karting when they were kids. Modify them, run a couple road courses, street courses, and even an oval or two, maybe even a dirt race. Hey, maybe do Bernie Ecclestone's sprinkler, wet race.
Yeah.
Where you had sprinklers to simulate rain. Maybe do that too.
Maybe it's a couple snow machines. Do a snow race.
Yeah. Put some tire chains on there. For IndyCar says 2 entries from each country, multiple disciplines and points for each race. Run it like a mini championship. 3 top drivers at the end get the medals, rally, open wheel, touring car, etc. Poet Shevchenko says something that would work really well would be a pit stop competition. Yeah, maybe put that as a factor. And then Historic Hot Laps adds in, agrees with the IROC idea. I feel a 100% spec deal like IROC would be the only way. Then the debate is open wheel or stock car. It would most likely be a road course, since that seems pretty universal across all platforms. FIA would have to not be involved since licensing is already too hard for them.
Well, I think that's the big thing is who would oversee it. I mean, the Olympics committee, yeah.
But if it's not licensed by the FIA, can you run the event? Like that, like from a safety standpoint.
I would think so, right? I mean, NASCAR isn't involved with the FIA. But you would just need a who.
But they have FIA approved like tracks and safety standards.
It's true.
So that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. But all great idea. It was just something that popped in my head. And as I was watching, I think it was Kayak Cross, where they're like 4 kayaks and they're racing. And I'm just like, well, why don't these guys are racing? They do skateboard cross. They do snowboard cross in the winter. Why can't we just, if they're going to race, let's just do auto racing?
They do like ice rally cross in Sweden, right? Or Norway or Finland. Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh, in any of those Nordic countries, they're just all over the ice and snow stuff.
For real. I asked Connor Daly super sub again after Junco split with Agustin Canapino. Lynn _IndyCar says, hopefully Connor will be able to run at least the last 4 ovals as his car is 5 points out of that last leader circle spot. Connor, best available oval driver. Jeremy from HBG saying, I guess the loud few that said this wasn't coming were slightly incorrect. Was that us? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think people maybe were saying that Canapino was going to be around.
Once I saw that, I mean, I thought Canapino was done after Road America. So it was surprising he came back.
Correct.
But once Connor Daly tested at Gateway, the writing was on the wall.
Absolutely.
Historic Hot Lap says 100% Connor Daly opportunity. There's still enough time to get this entry into the leader circle. Also, yes, with a strong oval driver in Daly, I think it's possible. Look, he's good at Gateway. That's the key thing. I mean, when you can get a top 5 in a Foyt car, that says something.
Well, I think the important thing is for Juncos is, can you just not lose at twofold? Can you get us into the leader circle, and can you not cost us any more money in terms of damage to the car?
Last part is critical.
I think that's the biggest thing. It's like we just need good finishes and bring the car home in one piece.
All right, that does it for the mailbag. Wait, there's one more entry. That's from Lynn also saying, Zach is 100% correct here. I swear if the race operations team was as consistent as their social media team, it would be champions or leading it. And it's after a headline on Motorsport. Arrow McLaren needs more consistency to challenge IndyCar's powerhouses. That from Zach Brown.
He's right. I mean, Zach Brown is right. He at least recognizes the issue, and what keeps every other team from competing with Penske and Ganassi is just that consistency. But driver consistency goes into the consistency of which McLaren doesn't have.
Yes, and you got to be great on pit stops, which they have improved, to be clear. They have improved a lot. But it's pit stops, it's strategy. Look, the Penske and Ganassi win all the time because they're the best teams. They have the best drivers. That's just the reality. And McLaren's trying to come at it where we're gonna pay money and invest and try to do all these things, but consistency is everything. And until McLaren can consistently, give Pato and the other drivers, to be clear, because Pato's the only car that's won a race for that team, consistent cars week in, week out, they're going to be on the outside looking in.
Definitely. And I think you look at McLaren too, in terms of the rivalry that they have off the track with Chip Ganassi, and even if it's just Zach Brown versus Chip, if that could translate to consistent battles on track at the top of the grid, that would add even more to that rivalry.
Time for news and notes. Not a whole lot to get to. Of note, the Wisconsin State Building Commission approved a third phase of track safety improvements for the Milwaukee Mile. Includes the replacement of the catch fence and concrete barrier walls inside turns 1 and 2. More drainage improvements, storm sewer improvements, regrading, asphalt replacement will be done as needed. That's interesting. To complete the work inside turns 1 and 2. All work should be completed ahead of racing events scheduled to occur at the track in June of 2025. So again, this is something to keep in mind for next year.
Duly noted.
Also, Davey Hamilton Jr. Will join HMD Motorsports for the Nashville. He joined him for the Nashville Super Speedway test, looking to make a return to a series formerly known as Indy Lights. He's a USAC Silver Crown race winner, obviously looking for a second chance in his career. Hopefully the testing went well for him. We have Alexander Rossi, who's going to return to racing at Gateway during the IndyCar break. He spent some time at Saratoga. Finally got to meet his horse, Castle Run, because he's invested in a horse.
Ooh. Via
West Point Bred, ABR's Stake and Stardom program. So
excellent.
Pretty cool to own part of a horse. There's a rumor, according to Italia Racing, ART Grand Prix exploring the option to enter Indy Lights. They're an F2 and F3 currently.
I did see that, I believe, yeah.
Thanks to Hickey 93 for pointing that out.
Again, that kind of goes back to if we have multiple teams inside the IndyCar paddock and outside looking to join Indy Lights, and they have a team with 10 cars, IndyCar can say, we need to limit this because we have more teams that want to get involved with Indy Lights. And is it that one of the things we've been saying? Car count was one thing, then you need more teams. And so maybe I'm backtracking a little bit at the criticism I directed a week or two ago at IndyCar with that. But again, they didn't give any reasoning why. If they would have said, hey, we want to limit it to 3 cars each because we have a lot of teams that want to get into Indy Lights that quite frankly don't have a path because of how many entries we already have. If they would just say that, then we would be like, that makes sense.
Yes.
Right? Just, again, it goes back to this ownership of this series and going, just tell us what's going, why? Tell us why. Tell us what's going on and why.
Updated odds for the IndyCar Championship via DraftKings. Alex Blow -200, Scott Dixon +500, Will Power +600, Colton Herta +800, Pato +1200, Scott McLaughlin +1800, Joseph Newgarden +5,000. Obviously, it gets a lot higher after that.
Is Stingray Robb mathematically eliminated yet?
I don't know.
He's lurking only 290 points behind.
It's going to have to win out.
He's going to need a lot of help.
The bounty card has been found via the Parkside Cards IndyCar trading cards. This is from IndyCard Exchange. It was a Connor Daly card that had a $1,000 cash prize.
And it was in one of the packs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Ryan Donahue for winning that. So congrats to him.
Congrats.
And Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is from Adam Stern, posted this Motorsport article. Interested in hosting the NASCAR Clash in 2026.
I did see that, which made me think, is NASCAR swooping into South America to take any type of potential race away from IndyCar? Because, South America has been on the radar, quote unquote, whether it's Brazil, return to Brazil, Argentina, et cetera, because could NASCAR be swooping in and taking any of that momentum?
And finally, Octane Press, which has done some racing books, announcing they're publishing a biography of A.J. Foyt. It'll be called Survivor Champion Legend by Art Garner. He wrote Black Noon, which if you read that book, it's
a very
excellent.
good book.
Talking about the, 1966 Indy 500 and the fatal crash that killed Dave McDonald and Eddie Sachs.
Yeah, just the chaos that was that race. Very good book if you haven't read it. So interested to pick up that biography of AJ when it comes out.
Absolutely. So again, that comes out, I want to say sometime in October. So pre-orders are available now, though. OctanePress.com. You can pre-order. They ship October 1st. So that is the date, and that's for the hardcover.
All right.
But that's the update there. Tweets of the week. There's just one tweet, and it was Meyershank Racing posting, let's be honest, what doesn't David Malukas laugh at? There's a picture of him obviously laughing, and he just replied with a picture of a mountain bike.
Very funny.
Which I thought was excellent. Okay, time for our random split era driver of the week.
All right, we're going back to the early IRL and talking about, we're getting to an area where we know some of these drivers, but some of our listeners may not. We're going with Tice Carlson, who was active in 30 races in the Indy Racing League from 1996 to 2002. It's a veritable who's who of teams he raced for. Imke Racing, PDM Racing, Team Pelfrey, and TriStar Racing. He particularly struggled at the Indianapolis 500. He entered 6 times in the Indianapolis 500. Twice he failed to qualify, 96 and 2001. Twice he had a practice crash and did not start, 1998 and 2000. Twice he started, 1997 started 26th, finished 19th. 1999 started 15th and finished 14th. Overall, in terms of his best finish in the IRL, came in 2000 in Las Vegas. In fact, his 2 best finishes, or his 2 career top 10s, were both at Vegas, 1999 and 2000. 1999, he finished 9th at Vegas. Those are always 2 top 10s in his career. Interestingly, after he was done racing, he did well at racing in IRL. He actually started the 2006 Freedom 100.
Interesting. I did not know that.
And then owned Fan Force United, which was an Indy Lights team.
I remember that team.
And actually in 2014 had announced that they were going to compete full-time in IndyCar in 2015 with Stefan Wilson, but didn't have the money. Sponsorship didn't come through and never competed in 2015. So Fan Force United started 1 race in the IndyCar era. It was in 2012 and finished last in the Indianapolis 500 with, do you remember the power, the engine power of
Lotus.
that team? Lotus.
Was it Jean Alesi?
Was Jean Alesi, yes. Finished 30. There was eventually black flagged in that race because Lotus was so slow. I think, was it Simona was in the other Lotus?
Simona, and there were a couple other, Sebastian Bourdais and Catherine Legge, and then also Oriol Servia, but I don't remember if he had switched by then.
But the only 2 Lotuses in that race in the Indianapolis 500 were Simona Di Silvestro and John Alesi.
Okay, so those other teams had switched.
Yeah, they had already bailed that year. And I think maybe a couple of those teams, their first time not with Lotus was at the 500.
That sounds right.
But that was what it was. Fan Force United, their one and only race owned by Tice Carlson in IndyCar, was the ill-fated 2012 Indianapolis 500 with the Lotus engine. But that is a history of Tice Carlson, Indianapolis native, 53 years old, and he is this week's random split era driver of the week.
All right. I have his autograph somewhere. I'm not sure where, but it's somewhere.
Somewhere deep in the bowels of the Caleb Hatch archives.
Yes. I have like a tote that has a bunch of like random, memorabilia stuff in the basement. Yeah. It's somewhere in there. I'm
very nice.
Pretty positive. Also, I have to issue a correction. Black Noon was about the 1964
64.
Indy 500.
Okay.
I knew 66 did not sound correct.
It was sometime in the 60s, but yes.
Yes.
But it is a good book. If you haven't read it, pick it up.
Very good. And then now there will be a book on AJ Foyt. I love reading racing books. I mean,
yes,
the Al Unser Jr. book was good. Indy Split was really good. The book...
Your book in Big and the Beast, you've read that?
Yes, I've read that
right?
several times.
Yeah.
That's really good. What is the one? Oh, the driver. I can't think of his name. The driver who basically ran a marijuana operation.
Yeah, whatever his name was. What was the one that was?
That was a really good book. They did a ESPN Netflix Untold Stories on that.
Correct. What was the Rapid Response is good?
Yes.
By Dr. Ovey, who was the longtime doctor for IndyCar and kart and stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff. If you haven't read some of those books, make sure to pick them up.
So if you're bored, look for some of these books, because that's a way you can essentially... Randy Lanier, that's the driver.
What it was.
But his book, his biography is interesting. Obviously, there's controversial parts. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a controversial part about an incident and how he kind of addresses it compared to how other people kind of believe it went down. But if you're looking for something to do racing related, highly recommend any of those books that we mentioned. I'm sure there are several others that we forgot. All right, well, that's it. Next week, it'll finally be race week again. And the Olympic break will be over. We'll be previewing a race and whatever news that comes down in IndyCar world. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.